Here Anne Burrows giving her speech on using body language. This is a 5 to 7 minute speech, and the title is Olive. Fellow Toastmasters and welcome guests. Do you remember when you were just a little tyke and people would say, "What's your favorite color?" You would beam and blurt out your favorite color. But seldom did anyone ever ask you, what was your least favorite color? Well, if I had a big box of Crayola crayons and I had to pick my least favorite color, it would be olive green. Now, I know some of you love olive green, and that's great, but it's my least favorite color. Truth be known, I don't even like olives. Years ago, we were in need of a new car. My daughter would soon be driving, and it was time. It just so happened that the neighbor across the street was selling one of his cars. He was a real car buff, so we knew he took good care of his cars. So my husband went over, talked to the neighbor, looked at the car, and they settled on a price. And we were the owners of a brand new car. Well, not exactly brand new. It was new to us. But the facts were, she was big, she was old, and she was ugly. But she was new to us. She was an Oldsmobile Delta 88 with a 454 V8 engine. Well, she was ugly, but she could go. But driving her was sort of like driving a boat. There was this buoyancy to the boat, to the car, because she was so big as you drove down the road. And when it went around the corner, it would dovetail in the back. How big was she? Well, she was probably twice as long as the average car and 4 times as wide as a regular car. You could fit 3 sumo wrestlers in that front seat with room to spare. And it was one long seat. Now, I remember the first time I drove her. My husband was at work, and I took the kids out to dinner. We got back in the car, and I went to start the car, put my foot on the gas, and the gas pedal stuck to the ground. That 454 V8 engine was booming at full speed. The kids were frantic. I was upset. I didn't know what to do, and no matter what I tried, it wouldn't release. I didn't even know how to pop the trunk yet. It was my first time driving. Fortunately, a good Samaritan walked by and offered to help. He helped to figure out how to pop that front, and then he looked inside like a doctor doing an examination. He poked around until he found that thingamajig, released it, and suddenly everything was okay. Thank goodness for good Samaritans. And it never happened again. Now, my daughter was a Girl Scout, and her leader was a Girl Scout leader extraordinaire. She always wanted to be sure that the girls had many opportunities to go camping. I was a co-leader and oftentimes the designated driver. And Olive was perfect for that, because we could fit in a whole busload of girls in the car. In that trunk, when you opened it, it went on forever. You could put gear, and you could put backpacks, coolers, you name it. It went in that back trunk with no problem. And if you've ever traveled with girls, you know they like to bring everything but the kitchen sink. We had some great times in Olive, driving to camp and back. The girls would have their heads out the window, and they'd be shrieking and screaming and giggling and laughing and sharing stories about their latest adventures. It was always a hoot. Now, I mentioned earlier that my daughter was about to learn how to drive. Can you imagine trying to learn how to drive in a boat? Well, the driving part maybe not too bad, but parallel parking a boat? Well, I figured if she could learn how to drive that, she could learn how to drive anything. And she eventually learned how to fly a plane. So I guess she was just preparing it by learning how to park a boat. Well, a strange thing used to happen when my daughter or I would drive the car. When you'd put on the turn signal, smoke would bellow up out of the driving console. Now, that's not a good thing. We would run home, tell my husband, and he would try to look to see if he could get it to do that when he drove, and it never happened. It must have taken 3 months before it finally happened when he was in the car. And of course, it got fixed immediately then, because having smoke bellowing out of your turn signal is not a good thing. Well, the years went on, and Olive continued to age. And our neighbor across the street finally told my husband that if he had known she was going to live that long, he would never have sold her to us. Now, Olive, just like us, started to get older, and she started to get uglier. You know how we get age spots on our hands? Well, Olive started to get age spots. On the front hood of the car, the paint started peeling off, revealing these brown rusty spots. And that roof, because of the sun hitting it, all that fabric just started to disintegrate and peel and blister. And it looked like she had the skeevies. In fact, this is how ugly she was. Ooh. And that front seat, every time my husband, my daughter, or I got in the car, we would have to adjust that seat according to our leg length. Well, after many years of this, poor Olive just plain old wore out. So we get in the car, adjust the seat according to our leg length, and then begin to drive down the road. And maybe 5-10 minutes later, all of a sudden, that front seat would lunge forward and jerk back and make this horrendous sound that scared the heck out of you. And every time it was a surprise. Now, my son was very disappointed because it was close to the time poor old Olive had to be put down because he wanted to have the opportunity to drive old Olive. But that was not meant to be. But I'll have to say, in the end, I learned something from Olive. They say you can't tell a book by its cover. Well, I found out that you can't tell a car by its color.